Well, let me roll you back a few years, and I was sitting in my brand new office. I was so proud. I had a door, I had a window, and I'm looking at these business cards that read Regional Sales Manager. And frankly, I was petrified because I had no clue how to be a regional sales manager. I had the good fortune of starting with a small company that eventually became the largest in the world in their industry, Varsity Spirit Corporation. We sold cheerleading, dance, and camps to schools and universities. But at the time, we were the David in the David and Goliath story. So I'm sitting in my office and with my door and window, and the fearmongers start in. Who are you to think you could be a leader? You're just a small town kid from Iowa. Why didn't you stay as a salesperson? You were doing just fine. And the biggest fear was that my bosses, the very people that promoted me, would find out I was an imposter. Well, frankly, it didn't take too long. About 2 months into my new position, my boss, Klein Boyd, walks into my office and sits down. And I was thinking, this is it, the big pink slip. And I will never forget the conversation. He looked at me and he said, Colleen, I've been watching you. And I know you're working real hard, but you're struggling. And I just want to remind you that my office is right down the hall. So here I thought I was coming in to have my boss give me a pink slip, and instead what he was coming in and really demonstrating empathy, stepping into my shoes and letting me know it was going to be okay. That's emotional intelligence. I went on to become vice president of sales for this company, got into this great profession of training, speaking, and development. And here's what I have noticed. Like a lot of VPs of sales and training firms, for many, many years I focused only on teaching the hard selling skills, pre-call planning, value propositions, questions. Still very important. However, I also found that we are still experiencing some of the same issues we did 25 years ago. A lot of people ask me, can emotional intelligence be improved? And the answer is yes. And the number one tool for improving emotional intelligence is to get some downtime, get some quiet time. Because it's only in the downtime that you can get still, you can get quiet. Because in the downtime, you gain clarity of thought. Because a cluttered mind is not a creative mind. A cluttered mind is not a clear mind. And in the quiet and in the still, you can start tuning into your emotions. What triggered you? Were you intimidated? Were you frustrated? Did you get off your game? Were you embarrassed? Because if you're not tuned into your emotions, here's what I will promise you. You are bound to keep repeating the same mistakes. So in the keynote, people walk away with a fresh perspective and respect for carving out that precious downtime, that still time. Now, here's what also happens when we default to a fight or flight response. It's called the knowing and doing gap. Because let me see a show of hands. How many of us are still facing the same issues in sales that we faced 20 years ago? Okay, this is going to be some reality testing. How many of you run into price shopping and your team or yourself, you're not charging what you're worth? Could I see a show of hands? Okay, how many of you still are having trouble accessing the elusive decision maker? Even though you go through courses in economic buyer, user buyer, technical buyer, all those cool courses, anybody having that? A lot of times I get asked to speak at sales conferences because they've had great speakers that have addressed the hard selling skills, pre-call planning, pursuit strategy, selling major accounts. So often we find knowledge isn't what's lacking out there, it's the execution of the hard selling skills. And that's really where emotional intelligence skills comes into play. And how many of you sometimes are looking at that pipeline, it is bursting full of unqualified prospects. maybe, just maybe, it is time to start looking at the soft skills that might be affecting the execution of hard selling skills. When I work with my sales audiences, I like to take them on a journey. In the EI world, we refer to that as self-actualization, this journey of improvement and learning. And the first thing I introduce is the concept of the neuroscience behind emotion management. So here's what would happen. The amygdala sees that tiger and it says, fight or flight, because that's where the fight or flight response resides. Here's what starts happening. Blood starts leaving the brain, which carries oxygen. My body shoots off adrenaline, big burst of energy. And I'm under stress, so my body emits cortisol, a stress hormone which affects my clarity of thought. Let's go back to that sales call. And I've got Jerry in front of me. That's not engaging, looking at his smartphone. It's very easy for the amygdala to take over and turn Jerry into a saber-toothed tiger. Has anybody been in a meeting, besides me, where your heart starts pounding? It's crazy, isn't it? He's just a human being. You know, a lot of salespeople know what to do, and yet in those difficult situations, emotions can start running the interaction rather than effective selling and communication skills. You know, next we move into a major influence skill that is often overlooked, empathy. And empathy is that ability to step into someone else's shoes and know what they're thinking or feeling. And I always challenge my audiences to ask this question. How can we possibly think we can influence another human being unless we know what they're thinking or feeling? Companies lose thousands, if not millions of dollars every year due to lack of empathy. And I will share with you, I find most salespeople are empathetic. However, they sometimes leave it in the car. I have observed more than one role play in my life where you do the teed up, you're setting up the meeting, and the person says, well, I'm having trouble with customer service, equipment failure, and the salesperson goes, great. And I love talking to organizations about the fact that the best organizations are emotionally intelligent sales organizations. They're competitive and they're collaborative. And often these two words aren't used in the same sentence. But what I remind people is that it takes a sales village to succeed in today's competitive environment. Here's a news alert. The competition's outside the building, not inside the building. Compete and collaborate. Or, I've seen this, especially in the age of technology. Top producers come into that group sales meeting and they start checking their email because after all, this meeting's for you guys. I'm hitting quota. If you have a I'm hitting quota rather than a we're hitting quota culture, you'll have good growth. You won't have great growth.
We brought Colleen Stanley to speak to the IESMD back in November of 2014 on the topic of emotional intelligence for sales success, and she did a tremendous job. And I want to tell you why. I want to give you 3 reasons why. First off, the content was tremendous. Colleen did a great job explaining why emotional intelligence is critical for sales success. She also spoke to how our audience of seasoned sales professionals and service professionals who need to sell should be able to use the emotional intelligence concepts to be more successful. As a matter of fact, she gave them ideas they could use that day to go out and be more successful with.
Now this is always what's funny, when the facilitator goes over to the table, did you notice all the hands went like this? He's got a story. It's time for a new perspective and a fresh perspective in sales. There's a body of research out there, a lot of research that shows that EQ, emotional intelligence, is as important as the IQ. So it's time for sales organizations to evolve. Don't forget your hard selling skills. Instead, incorporate the soft skills, emotional intelligence skill training with your hard selling skills. And when you are able to emotionally connect with prospects, customers, colleagues, families, then you're going to be on that great journey of not only business improvement and professional improvement. So my goal, my passion, my drive is to bridge that knowing and doing gap. Because when you know better, you do better. I hope we inspired you a little bit. I hope I enlightened you a little bit on how those soft skills can produce hard sales results. Thanks.